Hi, my name is Sheard, and I'm grateful to be with you here today for Wednesday's Word. Earlier last week, Pastor Colleen asked me if I'd be willing to do the Wednesday Word and share a brief time with you. And I don't know about you, but making a video that includes myself being in it isn't something I normally do. I had planned that evening to write an email and politely decline, but before I did that, I was on Facebook and reading a couple posts of friends, and I saw one from Denzel Ballroom, and in that Denzel talked about a person very influential in his life, Ravi Zacharias. If you're not familiar with Ravi, he was an incredible apologist and sharer of the Christian faith around the world, and just helped countless thousands of people encounter Christ in a new way. And it made me interested in going back and just learning a little bit more about Ravi. And as I read, I just saw over and over and over the joy that came to his life as he told others about Christ. And so I moved from a polite no to an uncomfortable yes to be with you here today. And I'm excited about sharing with you a parable that's been really important in my own life, both for inspiration and just for the insight that it's given to me during times of opportunity and good things happening, and certainly now as we're all navigating the pandemic, times of real challenge. The parable is the parable of the Good Samaritan. And I'm going to read it here, and then to kind of find a comfortable balance between a full video and something different. We'll transition. I'm going to show you just a few pictures, and I'm going to tell you three stories of how this parable has really come to life for me. One from a long time ago, one from actually a year ago today, and then one from just a few weeks ago as being in the middle of the pandemic. I hope that the stories will bless and encourage you. So let me read to you from Luke 10, the parable of the Good Samaritan. In reply, Jesus said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho when he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him, and he went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and when he saw the man, he passed him by on the other side. So too a Levite, when he came to the place, saw him and passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, he took pity on him. He went to him, bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. Then he put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii. He gave them to the innkeeper. 'Look after him,' he said, 'and when I return, I will reimburse you for any extra expense you may have.' Now which of these do you think was the neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" And they replied, the expert of the law, "The one who had mercy on him." And Jesus said, "Go and do likewise." There are so many important lessons that we can take from this passage, but I want to focus on a few points that the parable gives us to what I believe will be of encouragement to you. Life happens, and sometimes on our way to Jericho, something unexpected, unfair happens to us and happens to our lives. It is so easy in this parable to focus on, first of all, the bad people in the story, the robbers, the priests, the Levite, or conversely, to focus on what we can learn from the Samaritan, who cared for the man in the moment and provided the resources to ensure his care in the future. But the part of the story that I want to focus on is the person who was robbed, the man who was beaten and thrown to the side, half dead, and left to die. The longer I live, the more I realize that in spite of our hard work, our planning, and desire to be in control, it's clear that life is simply going to happen. And sometimes life brings us things that are not fair, that simply happen to us. And it's in those moments this parable teaches us that the only gift we have to offer is to offer our need. A hand extended, seeking help. It's tempting. I grew up in the Midwest, and the value of hard work and self-sufficiency, to be self-sufficient and to always try and work to that end, to be strong and to never need anything, to always act that we have our life together. But sometimes things simply happen and it's no longer true. And our desire to travel to Jericho must take a different route. What I want to encourage everyone is to see in this passage how God is with us in all situations. And the invitation to you and to me is to recognize our need, extend our hand, and to accept the gifts that only God can give. And as I've reflected on this passage and how God has shown his interest to pick me up, to bind my wounds, and to carry me to Jericho, I wanted to share with you 3 stories that I hope will bless and encourage you. And I like to think of these really as God of the first move. Let us consider our lives of faith as we reflect on the parable, and that our God of the first move, the God that is always seeking, always engaged, and always interested in our lives, is the God who is always faithful. I first learned this lesson in a profound way when I was with our sons. This is the story from a long ago. They were very young, and our first son was getting ready to start kindergarten. So we divided up, and I took our youngest son and played on the jungle gym, which you see here in the picture, and my wife took our older son to engage his future class and his teacher. I had been thinking and praying about this moment, but as I got closer, I could see from my vantage point in the jungle gym that things were not going as planned. My wife was kneeling in front of our son and telling him that things were going to be okay. But I could see just in his body language that he wasn't believing the story. Now the good news is that God had already been working in the lives of my son and in the lives of the people that he was about to meet. And each new student met the teacher, and our teacher for that year, her name was Billy. And as our son worked his way forward in the line, the anxiety I could see was building. And it was his turn to eventually meet Billy. And about that time, our youngest ran in that direction, and I was close enough to actually hear what was said. And I could see Billy kneeling in front of our son and saying, "Ben, I am so glad to finally meet you. I've been praying for you all summer." And she put her hand on his shoulder, and said, "We are going to have so much fun learning together." And just like that, the fear and trepidation that I could see in our son left, and the small boy we knew and loved returned. In that moment, I saw the hand of God in the life of my son, and it touched me in such a way that the God who holds the universe in his hand showed up at Memorial Park to care for our little boy. The lesson for us here is to trust that God is always active and interested in our lives. We never have to encourage God's interest. It can never be more, for it is full, complete, and total. Our responsibility is to look and see. He is the powerful God who is at work in quiet, mysterious ways. Know that God engages our lives and expect his presence, expect him to show. And when we do that, we can see him at work. We can see him journeying with us to Jericho. So truth 1 that I want to leave you with is that God delights in your life, and that in that delight he is fully present. No activity is needed by you to get God interested, your activity and prayer should be simply to see how and where God is engaged in your life, and then extend your hand to receive the good gifts of God. Story number 2. 1 year ago this week, I had the privilege of journeying to South Africa as part of my responsibilities at Westmont. It has been a special journey to see how God has awakened in the life of the college a heart for the continent of Africa. And part of understanding what God was attempting to teach our school was the journey to South Africa, and in an attempt to better understand why. One of the places that we visited beyond Durban and Cape Town and Angola and Stellenbosch is we also visited Robben Island. Robben Island was the place where Nelson Mandela spent 18 of the 27 years in which he was imprisoned. Here's a picture of Cape Town from Robben Island, and we were able to take a tour there. And I've always loved tours. They're interesting to me. You get to learn something that you don't know much about, and the learning happens actually in the space in which the historical event occurred. And I think the combination of those two really allow the learning to sink in. Tours also, though, can just be a way to fill up a day with check boxes that you want to get done. And unfortunately, I was more in that mood than in the prior. I wanted one thing from this tour, and that was to get a picture of Nelson Mandela's cell. But God had other plans. And the tour guide that we had was explaining the history of the island and how since the 17th century it had been a place that had incarcerated prisoners. And the unimaginable evil that had been inflicted on the guilty and non-guilty alike by those in power over that time was almost too much to hear. But it was here that the radicalized Mandela came, and it was here, years later, that Mandela emerged, who would go on to free his country and to become a moral voice for the entire world. How could something that transformational happen in a place that is so evil? Well, our tour guide provided the insight. Beyond sharing about the evil and the pain that was endured, he also spoke about Robben Island as a place where men who were brought together against their will cared for each other, prayed for each other, sang hymns together. And it was in these acts of caring, much like we read in this parable of the Good Samaritan, that their wounds were bound and they became men of incredible impact and power. You see here our tour guide, and I've rarely been around an individual of just immense authority, and he moved my heart in ways that it's really actually quite difficult to describe. So life happens, and that in these places of pain, they can also become incredible places of transformation. And then I want to end with my third story. And here you're seeing 3 pictures actually of the executive team at Westmont College. And we're meeting in what's called the Hieronymus Room so that we can have enough place to do social distancing and to do the work of the college. And here we meet to plan and try to figure out a way forward for Westmont in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. Don Patterson, who attends our church and is one of our faculty members, wrote me an email and asked me how things were going and to let me know that he was praying for us. And when I wrote him back, I was surprised what came out of my fingers as I wrote my response in the email. It said that the place had become, in the middle of all the planning and the huge weight of the responsibility, a room filled with laughter and love. And lesson number 3 is that places that normally we wouldn't choose can become holy ground. And each day when I show up for our meetings to talk about how to prepare to restart the school and to move the mission of our college forward, as I enter that room, it's become a special and holy place. And while I wouldn't have chosen it, because God showed up, it is a place of transformation, healing, and purpose. I want to end by saying that the life of faith is a life surrounded by the presence of God. Our invitation is to develop eyes to see, and from the parable of the Good Samaritan, the ability to do this begins by extending our hand and admitting our need. When we do this, our good God will meet us in our lives because He truly takes joy in us. And when life batters us and others pass by, it's our God who stops. It's our God who binds our wounds. It's our God who carries us forward and provides everything we need for our journey. May these words encourage you this week, and I look forward to hearing your stories of God's goodness expressed to you. God bless.
This has been Wednesday Word with the Free Methodist Church of Santa Barbara. We hope that you will join us for worship this Sunday. Our Sunday service video will be available at 8 o'clock a.m. on our YouTube channel.